Good afternoon and welcome back to Sports with Eaves. We have a fantastic show in store for you today, and I've got a special co-host, my mentor, and I mean that sincerely, the Tim Sullivan from the Courier Journal. Tim, welcome to Sports with Eaves.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We've got a lot to get to today. But first, we've got hot topics. First will be the University of Louisville-Miami loss. The second segment will be the upcoming game, Kentucky versus Auburn at Jordan Ferris Stadium Saturday. The third segment will be the backing up of college basketball, men's and women's. Let's get started. First question for Tim. After watching the University of Louisville debacle, the start of the third quarter was probably the most outstanding thing I've seen in a long time. 2 plays for over 150 yards, both touchdowns, and not one University of Louisville player got close to a Miami offensive player. Have you ever seen anything like that before?
Well, I've seen long touchdowns before. I don't know that I've seen back-to-back
Tim.
touchdowns on one play, drives that essentially took a lot of the air out of Louisville after they had made a comeback.
And it looked like University of Louisville was on the complete opposite side of the field.
Particularly after Louisville had closed the gap to 7 points twice.
Exactly.
You have enough of those plays, it's going to be dispiriting and as one of the players said, devastating.
My question, Coach Satterfield, second year, great offensive mind, his scheme, everyone enjoys it. But defensively, Coach Brown, defensive coordinator, those kind of errors seem to me that fundamentally they're not building their defensive correctly. Have you ever thought that? Do you think that Coach Brown is doing an adequate job?
I don't know that it's so much the coaching as it is the personnel. I don't know that they're quite up to Miami's talent level. If you look at the recruiting rankings, and those aren't certainly the last word on that subject, Miami's got a lot more players, I think, on defense who are going to play professionally than Louisville does at this point. There isn't a tremendous pass rush. There aren't a lot of great cover guys from what I can tell. And you get exposed. The longer that a play goes against an undermanned defense, you're going to find a flaw. And I think Miami did that repeatedly.
My problem is this, Tim. It's the way that they were beat. When you're watching a football game, you see a play develop. The second touchdown was absolutely a debacle. There was nobody on the right side of the field at all for University of Louisville. They hiked the ball, the quarterback held it for about a second and a half, threw a 8-foot bump pass to a gentleman who caught it, and there was no one other than the players on the sideline close. Whatever happened to the 2 deep safeties, balance field to make sure that you keep everyone in front of you, build your defense correctly so that you have an opportunity to make a tackle? I don't mind bad talent. That means missed tackles. But when you have a debacle to when they can throw the ball 11 yards and there's not a player close, that to me says fundamentally not sound defense.
Well, there's some schematic issues, but if you go back to the last year of Bobby Petrino, they've played 22 games against Power 5 opponents, and the opponents have averaged 43.9 points per game.
Yes.
This is a recurring problem. Now, it was highlighted against Miami on those 2 plays. I think the problem runs deeper.
Well, we've got some highlights that we're going to watch. Of course, Tutu Atwell had an excellent game. University of Louisville's offense produced 34 points, over 400 yards plus, and then you're going to see the 2 debacles where Miami was able to go over 150 yards in 2 plays without being touched.
A recent article in Newsweek cited that black colleges produce 70% of all black dentists and doctors, 50% of black engineers and public school teachers, and while HBCUs only account for 3% of the nation's colleges, they account for about 20% of the degrees awarded to African Americans. Did you know that 40% of the African American members of Congress, 50% of African American lawyers, and 80% of African American judges all graduated from an HBCU? Simmons College of Kentucky is just one of America's historically black colleges and universities that can help you pursue and realize your dreams. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
We've had enough of the ACC. That's minor league compared to the SEC football. University of Kentucky is opening up this weekend at Auburn, Jordan Fair Stadium. Auburn's ranked number 8 in the AP poll. I think University of Kentucky's 23rd, 24th in the AP. What do you think happens to the Wildcats?
I think it's going to be a tough place for them to win. You look at the schedule without the non-conference games, and
Big boy football.
Kentucky could be a better team with a worse record this year.
Absolutely.
And maybe a significantly worse record. I picked them 5-5, and
you were being generous.
I think I erred on the side of optimism. Because that schedule is just brutal.
I'm at Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. I have friends. I've got a speaking engagement in Tennessee on Friday, this Friday. And I've got friends that live all through Tennessee. They're waiting for University of Kentucky. They're ranked 16th in the country. They think this is their year to turn it around. They want Kentucky so bad. We think the Kentucky-Louisville rivalry is big. They're going to have boats coming down from everywhere for that game. Kentucky's got their hands full. Coach Stoops has built a more than adequate program. Here's the reason why. I want you to tell me your opinion. He's had major setback injuries, Coach Stoops and the Wildcats, the last 2 years.
Right.
But he's been able to still develop and put his team in bowl games. They've been able to destroy University of Louisville. He's been able to show that they have found a way to win. And that's a mark of a great program. What do you think the job he's done at University of Kentucky?
Well, I think last year was, in many ways, the best job he's done. Improvising in the middle of the season, creating a whole new offense with Lynn Bowden, and he didn't do it by himself.
Yes.
His coaching staff, I think.
Offensive coordinator Graham.
Right, invested, everything in a player who, they had no expectation or no reasonable expectation was going to be able to perform, and he performed brilliantly. I think you can't say enough about the job that Mark Stoops and his staff have done, but the climb gets harder and harder in that league. And, they could be 6-4, 5-5, and be better than they were last year, but we'll never know it because the schedule is just so brutal.
Yes, they've got all SEC conference games. When do the fans in Kentucky want more? The basketball and the football is like this. They want Coach Calipari Final Four national championships. A lot of Kentucky fans give the football team a pass. When do they raise their elevation on the expectations for the program?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that there's kind of an understanding of what they're up against. I mean, beyond the current issues with competing with LSU and Alabama and Georgia, et cetera, you've got a pretty small recruiting base. They have to go out of state. Georgia is a tremendously rich recruiting area.
Yes.
Florida.
Yes.
Alabama is unique in college football, is able to draw.
They got two from Hawaii. They get everyone.
Yeah.
Alabama gets everyone.
Yeah. So that's what you're up against. You put Kentucky in another league, ACC, maybe even the Big Ten. I think they're pretty competitive, but in this league, it's going to be very tough sledding, and I think fans understand that. I mean, I may be wrong, and there may be an element that says, when are we going to beat Alabama? But I don't think that's a very large part of that fan base.
A lot of people think the Big Ten is the best conference. You got to slow your roll with throwing that SEC around. Up north, Ohio State thinks that they have the best program in the country. But when you're still talking about Kentucky fans, they've upgraded the practice facility. They've upgraded Kroger Stadium. They have a recruiting base. They've got a great recruiter. When is it time for Kentucky to truly break that top 10?
I think
The third best team is what I'm expecting Kentucky to do in the next 3 years in the SEC.
that's a pretty high standard in that league. I think that's what you aim for, but I don't think it's necessarily a realistic goal.
A lot of people think that they can, because
you're doing.
they think they can beat Auburn this weekend. A lot of Kentucky fans.
Well, you have to believe that, whether it's true or not. Realistically, I'd have to pick Auburn in that game, playing at home, given their roster. I'm sorry, I cannot be as optimistic as you.
He said it. I'm going with the Cats. That's Tim Sullivan's pick. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about college athletics and the backing up of men's and women's college basketball. Talk to you in a minute. Welcome back with Sports with Eaves. I've got a special co-host, Tim Sullivan, sitting in with me today, and we're going to shift gears. It's now time to talk about college basketball. And the Division I Council has backed up the start date 15 days to November 25th, first game. Practice will start October 13th. Tim, do you think they backed up the season because of COVID-19, or do you think they backed it up because they wanted to try to get out of the way of football?
Well, I think to some extent both, but COVID-19 is driving the bus at this point, and it's leading all of the decisions that are being made. And I think every sport, every business is trying to buy time as best they can, knowing that there's still not a vaccine. There's 200,000 Americans dead, and anything that can contribute to slowing that mortality rate is going to be seen as a positive. I think at the same time, the football season has been compromised. There's been delays. There's been
Notre Dame had 4 players test positive today.
Right, and I don't think they're going to practice. So
yes, that's correct.
We've had numerous postponements. So I think everybody's just kind of playing it by ear and saying, how many games can we realistically get in? And we'll aim high, but recognize that the likelihood is we're going to have some disruption.
No, there's no question about that. COVID-19 holding the attendance in a football stadium to 20%. So University of Louisville, 11,000, 12,000 fans. What happens in the basketball arena? Indoors. What will the governor dictate, and what do you think the University of Louisville will do to try to put fans in the stands?
Well, I think that it's optimistic to think that they can have the same percentages in an indoor arena.
Okay.
But, we have a little time. It's now mid-September. The season opens in 2 months. Where are things at that point? You might not have any fans. You might have the same percentage. You might have a higher percentage. I think it's completely in flux at this point, as we've seen. There have been numerous events that were planned with fans and ended up with none. The Indy 500,
Yes.
the Kentucky Derby, and now the Breeders' Cup. Just for some local examples. I think it's very fluid, and I'd love to see some fans in the stands. I don't expect a full house or anything close to it.
Well, Tim, a lot of people on the counter side said there were no fans in Kentucky Derby more because of the protests more than COVID-19. So do you think the protest had anything to do with limiting the 26,000 fans that were supposed to have been allowed at Churchill Downs?
I think it's a factor, but I don't know that it's the decisive factor. The Breeders' Cup is 6 weeks away, and they're not going to have fans. I don't think they're expecting protests at Keeneland, certainly you can't be oblivious to what's going on in this city and the unrest. Even as we speak, the city's kind of in lockdown, awaiting a decision on the Breonna Taylor case.
Yes.
So, given the protests that we saw at Churchill Downs, I think they were very uneasy about the idea of spectators coming in and having to negotiate that crowd. There's a little conflict downtown, but it didn't rise to the level that I think a lot of people feared. That has to enter into the equation. The Kentucky Derby's run 146 times. They want to run 147. So, if you have to take a hit this year financially, you do so to keep the event going.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Back to basketball. No preseason game, no exhibition games. What will happen to the performance the first month of the season when teams aren't really able to prepare?
Well, I think you're going to be able to prepare to a certain extent. I mean, you're going to have inter-squad games. You're going to have scrimmages, but the ability to host a lopsided game against a Bellarmine or some team you bring
Simmons
in.
College.
Or Simmons College.
We're talking about lopsided games.
For a big guarantee. That helps a lot of the smaller programs, but I don't know how much the elite teams get out of those games other than exercise and a little revenue.
Well, the question is this, Tim, because they have to be careful with inter-squad scrimmages because of Tracy. My opinion, if I was a college coach today, and I've been doing this 30 years, I would probably break my teams up into two groups. I would practice groups of 6. One group would have 7, 13 scholarships, a few walk-ons, so that I could separate my players. I would play a lot of 3-on-3 half-court offense. You can run your offense 3-on-3. So that I would always make sure that I had a certain amount of players that could play. Because if 1 or 2 basketball players goes down and you contact Trace, you're almost done for 2 weeks. It almost shuts you down. So a lot of this will have to do with what they do in practice and how prudent they are with separating their groups. Football should do the same thing also. Well, they should separate their team.
I think that's good thinking. And one of the things that Scott Satterfield has done at Louisville is they've cross-trained players at different positions, anticipating that there might be shortages at some point in the season. I think that's just smart planning, given the environment that we're in. Coaches, I think, get a bad rap sometimes of being so focused on their job that they miss the wider world and the context, that the impact of COVID-19 and the potential disruption that it can cause your team. Then you're not a very good coach. You need to be, I think, pretty vigilant about that.
Final Fours, championships. After the maximum of 27 games, we got the NCAA tournament, Indianapolis. I do believe, I could be wrong this year.
see
Final
using his
Four,
papers.
is that correct?
Sounds right.
I think that's correct. Atlanta was canceled. Give me your pick. Who do you think will come out on top of the 2021 basketball season?
Oh, jeez.
Duke's loaded like always. Kentucky.
Yeah, well, the Duke's,
Louisville.
Yeah, all the usual
Did you get that
suspects
phone
are going to be in the hunt. I saw
It wasn't mine.
a ranking earlier today with Gonzaga number 1. I've never believed that Gonzaga was going to win, and I think that's mainly because of their schedule. I just don't know that they're steeled to that level of competition. You know, I kind of like Michigan State, but I think they've had some
issues, yeah.
some departures.
Those teams had some issues.
And
I think my team's got a chance. Gonzaga's got a chance.
I'm going to withhold judgment at this point and try to get a little better handle on the teams before I
You don't have the opportunity to hold back. You got to give me a pick.
Well, I will pick Michigan State.
You go Michigan State?
Yes.
I'm going Gonzaga. This is their year. He has been forcing this season. Coach, he wanted to play this season worse than anything just this year.
But I'm so stuck. Like, I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it.
To hold out all the schools that are going through the scandal with the FBI, he wanted them to shelve those teams. We love you. Take care. Bye-bye.